Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Wood. I will be your producer for today's Liz's lunch, and we have some special guests with us today, Jason and Sedale. For Perez, she is running for Vista City Council District 2, a Navy veteran, and she's passionate about this community. But she also is very passionate about her heritage with Mono, Native American, and her cultural family. So she believes in that we should have a California for all. With Jason, Jason is he has a bunch of different leaderships and the founder of Xnergy, award-winning engineering, and he's here today to ask some good, strong questions for Perez. Also joining us is Sedale. He has been an entrepreneur since childhood and really changing the landscape for grant writing today, especially for startups. So without further ado, I would like to bring Prez on so she could talk a little bit about her platform and then bring her guests on today. So Liz, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon with Lunch with Liz. This is our second official Lunch with Liz segment. And, Lunch with Liz is very casual conversation. I know I'm running for Vista City Council, District 2, here in beautiful, sunny San Diego County. But with that, I want to try to leave as much of the politics aside because we're talking local government, right? And with local government, and just I believe strongly all government, it just makes sense to have common sense, right? Common sense. And whenever we're making decisions as leaders, it should also mean meaning and purpose and thinking ahead and long term. And that's why we're here today. I'm just going to reference an article that I saw within the San Diego Tribune this Sunday regarding the unfortunate city layoffs that Vista is going to be enduring and has endured starting this week. Is the city layoffs with Parks and Rec, closures, and of course I do understand we're all in globally, especially here in the US and here in California, we're experiencing, high numbers of the pandemic, and this wave has definitely reached our coast and our city. And I think it's absolutely imperative that we do implement creative government solutions. And what does that mean? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So we have Jason Davis, who I've known for a long time, and Sedale Turbovsky, who I've got to know, and I guess you would say probably the past 4 years. And I met these two gentlemen because I am a solution finder, but along with that, I do have that creativity sense and knowing that there absolutely has to be more than just the government solution of this is how we always run things. And I'm just going to base it on my service. I spent 8 years in the Navy, 1 year in the reserves. I come from a military family, and I strongly believe it's people over party. It's common sense over party. It's humanity over politics. And we just need to build at what's right and do what's right. And my family, we live here in the city of Vista. We've lived here since 2006. And I definitely want to continue this conversation, how we can continue to build a better Vista, North County, San Diego County. And Jason is here in San Diego County. Sedale, you'll have to update me where you're at. But I'm going to go ahead and segue onto Sedale, because I think it's what you've created is essential for a lot of people here, not just within San Diego and Vista, but a lot of people here within California, as we're taking a look at what can we do in response to what we're seeing today with this pandemic and with funds tightening up, what creative solutions that are out there. And I'd like you to talk more about what you put together with open grants and how that can solve not only company issues and company challenges, but also local government to state and federal government. Do you mind just kind of elaborating on open grants and what that is?
Yeah, not at all. I'm so excited to be here. I'm actually in Sacramento these days, so enjoying the 100-degree weather out here. Open Grants was developed kind of, I think when we first met, it was a few years ago on a project that we were working on at the Port of San Diego. And, the thing that you said, you mentioned, hey, there's probably better ways to do things. And unfortunately, what's happened over the last 50 years is we have this, billions and billions of dollars that the government pours into innovation and research and development of new and exciting technologies, everything from the internet to cell phones to self-driving cars, the core technologies that run all of these transformational things that are part of our lives now came out of government-funded projects. And the problem that has occurred over the last few years is while the government and agencies have continued to dump more and more money into this ecosystem, our return on investment as a nation has really stagnated. And there's a lot of really interesting math to back that up. But basically, science funding and funding for innovation is broken. And while there's a few bright stars out there in the ecosystem at large, there's a big problem. And so at Open Grants, we developed a solution to provide increased access and transparency in the public funding space. So we have an end-to-end solution for startups and small businesses looking to access government grants. And we provide them not only a service where they can quickly and efficiently find those grants, but they can also find grant writers who can help them send in applications. And then they have tools. We have tools on the back end we provide them to actually help them manage those applications. Because the main pain points you see out there are not only that people aren't aware that grant funding is available to them. By the time they become aware, they have a hard time actually responding because there's no kind of standard application out there. Every agency has their own method. And then finally, once someone actually does get a grant, they get instantly swamped by just a cascade of administrative tasks that they have to do. And eventually they're going to get audited, then, and not in a bad sense, but it's just a matter of course. So then they have to deal with that. And as a small business or a startup, it really becomes untenable working with the government in that kind of paradigm. And Open Grants fundamentally shifts that. So we reduce this massive opportunity cost and administrative burden for accessing capital by 90 to 99%, and give startups all the tools they need and small businesses the tools they need to be able to focus on the important transformational work they're doing. Like, these people are already changing the world. They're doing things to make our lives better, to make our air cleaner, to make transportation safer. And we're like throwing a wrench in the works by saying, hey, here's all this money, but guess what? It's really hard to use and almost impossible to manage without like making a few mistakes here and there. So we provide them the peace of mind to know that, hey, our job is to spend money and change the world, and Open Grants takes care of the rest of that. That's what we're doing at Open Grants, is giving people, operationalizing that ecosystem of money so that more innovative solutions can make it to market.
Can you talk a little bit more about government? I heard you. Thank you for that explanation, by the way. I understand it on a company sense, but do you mind just elaborating a little bit more on the government side of things? Because actually, during my time as deputy secretary in Sacramento as well, familiar with that hot weather and allergies. Beautiful trees, but they do come with the allergies. I wanted to just hear a little bit more how government can utilize your technology. And I know that a lot of things have changed, not really a lot, but a lot in a good sense in terms of where your company's at today compared to where when we last spoke about a year ago.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question. So one of the big things that we've found is, and I want to make sure to come across here the right way, I think that the people behind these agencies are great, and there are really cool programs out there that work really well. But by and large, these bureaucrats who have a mission to accomplish and money to deploy are really, they have handcuffs on when it comes to actually being able to deploy money the right way. They don't have the tools they need to understand their stakeholders. They don't have the tools they need to communicate with their stakeholders, and they certainly don't have the infrastructure to actually deploy capital in an efficient way. And so Open Grants works on two levels. Of course, for those seeking grant money, you can sign up and obviously take advantage of all the services. But for government agencies, we provide a modern infrastructure where capital can be deployed efficiently, where impacts can be tracked, and where stakeholders can be engaged with in a modern way that not only encourages discussion, but also encourages a wider syndication of the message and the opportunity. So right now, what you frequently see is that there's teams that know that you have to sign up on this very specific listserv for a really specific agency in order to get their funding opportunities out your way. If you're just a startup, or a small business person, and you're just trying to make your way in the world, and all of a sudden there's a pandemic, there's all these Paycheck Protection Program loans coming out. You're just drinking from a fire hose, and you have no idea where to go or who to talk to. Everything's shut down. It's hard to talk to anyone. All the phone numbers go to some automated system. I mean, it's just a mess. And Open Grants cleans that up. It provides these bureaucrats who are really well-meaning. And frequently, and I really do believe this, like a lot of them really want to do a good job, and they're out there trying to make positive change with the capital that they have and the tools they have. And they simply don't have the tools they need at the moment. And Open Grants really provides that modern infrastructure for deploying and managing public funding.
Thank you for explaining that. It's so basically, if you think of it as more of like a streamline, instead of having this web to search for all these different grants and programs, there it is in one spot. So it condenses everything. And I'm very military in some ways, many ways, but having it all there is I think is key, especially when you're talking government and there's so much information, there's so much going on, and a lot of silos. And to actually break down those silos and work creatively. And just to kind of throw it out there, so there's the California Energy Commission grants, there's California Parks and Rec grants that are available, California Arts grants, the Department of Resources Water, I actually wrote it down here, Cal Recycle, the California Air Resources Board. There's so many different opportunities. Now, these are just state. We're not even talking federal, right?
Yeah.
And other opportunities that are even outside of this that are, we're talking private possible funds. So I want to, with that, now we know this information and it has been utilized before. And I don't want to say, well, these are the possibilities, let's go do it. What I am saying is that here are the possibilities that have existed in the past, present, and will be more in the future. And it has been done. And that's where I want to also talk about what has been done. And Jason, I know that you can help us with that because you've done so much with your company's Xnergy. I met Jason, I want to say about, geez, I don't want to age myself. Yeah. I know, for a while. Almost 13, 14 years, who's counting? But any case, Jason is a veteran and comes from a family of service. His father is also a veteran, I think Korean War and also Vietnam War.
Vietnam War, yes.
Oh, excuse me, Vietnam War veteran. And so I know we kind of come from that same make of DNA, and that service is important. So, and for me, service, I wanted to continue to do that with my company, and taking a look at how I could do that is with the social entrepreneurship perspective and how to give back to my community through my company, and then continuing that service and my government service as well with working with the state. But I wanted to hear more about how you continue your service outside of uniform through Xnergy, and talk about how your company has impacted positively communities here, right here in North County, actually. And I'd love for you to even talk about your project at Encinitas.
Sure. You know, I'll start off with a little background. You mentioned my dad. He did 4 tours in Vietnam. He's my hero. So his last tour, he signed up for just to keep his little brother out. And, you know, he's a veteran. He's got Agent Orange issues, but he's still kicking. He's, you know, fighting through. He's in his 80s. 5 different cancers unrelated, anemia and diabetes, all, again, Agent Orange related, not including his back problems. But, you know, I was raised in the service. My dad did 30 years total. And then after he retired, he still worked and served. He worked for the Navy Exchange because he was in the Seabees, and he worked for Navy Exchange facilities, did 20 more years there. And then from there went to MWR, which for everyone in the military, it's welfare recreation. And he was in charge of, you know, officers clubs and pools, bowling alleys, and so forth. And again, retired from there. So for us, we were brought up serving. I lived in multiple countries and multiple cities, and I'm a Navy brat. So it was very, it was almost automatic that I also served. You know, I went to the California Maritime Academy up in Vallejo. I was commissioned officer after graduating there, and spent almost 6 years in the reserves from there. And then when I started my company, you know, the thought process and just training and the lifestyle was, you know, to act and do things in the same way under service to our employees first, service to our customers concurrently. So enough about me. What I want to add on to a little bit about what we do for cities, and not necessarily just us. What's available for cities like Vista, and how they can take advantage of those things, and tying into the grant conversations we were just having a moment ago. You know, we did a project, for example, for the city of Encinitas, where under a California code that we were able to negotiate a private and public relationship partnership that allowed us to take the civic center, you know, do cool roofs, daylighting, and new central plant, thermal storage to offset daytime electricity into nighttime, which is a lot cheaper, and of course solar, and put all those things together for the city where they're saving money for the next 25 plus years. That's the life of the expected life of the equipment in the project. The key component to getting a project like that together for a city is, where does the capital come from? It comes from grants. It comes from rebates. It comes from even private partnerships. There's a lot of tax incentives involved with renewable energies, and cities, municipalities can't take advantage of that federal tax credit. So you need to bring in private partnerships that have the tax appetite to monetize those tax incentives. For solar, specifically, it's now 20% of the project cost as a tax credit, but in the past it was up to 30%, and that's a significant part of a project. So you have to bring in that private partnership to monetize that. Some of the things that, you know, can be cobbled together for cities, as you look at today's concerns with COVID-19, you know, still here and probably here for a bit, who knows how long. How do we, you know, and this goes not just for cities, but, you know, also because who Lize is, tribes. You know, how the tribes take advantage. It's identical for cities. As you have issues, how do you get people safely into a building? How do you give consumer confidence to go into your buildings, into your workplaces? And how do you do all that safely, and how do you afford to do that? You know, there's CARES Act money out now. For example, for the tribes, one of the initiatives we're working on is in collaboration with some architects and some other people that are pivotal in what we're doing, is taking a need today, COVID-19, and how to mitigate that, and how to deal with it from a tribal perspective, and get that money in, not to use just one time for COVID-19, but how do we repurpose that to be used further beyond COVID-19? And this initiative, the reason I'm describing it, because it can be implemented in the city. You have a facility that either is an existing non-used facility, or maybe it's something that is built with this capital, and the capital stack again is grants, it's a COVID cares money and private money coming in too, to take a need now, spend that money now to mitigate the COVID risk, testing centers, urgent care facility, really triage facility to if you have a COVID issue, you need to send them to a hospital if they need care beyond what you can do in a triage or urgent care. But these facilities can then be repurposed, like for the tribal example, is repurposed into a PACE facility or a long-term elderly care facility that they need. And it's not just wasting that grant money. That's
Right.
Again, hard to get, confusing, and that's where Sedale was talking about. You have to know how to get that, how to manage it, how to audit it, but not just waste it on a one-time deal, but to continue to use that to repurpose it for
Right.
long-term needs. And again, cities have that same issue. Cities have to get their workers back into their building. And is this just a temporary? You see it now. You see people putting the temporary tents, and they're gowned up doing their temperature checks. But there's things beyond that need to be done. Some cities don't have local hospitals. They don't have local urgent cares. They need a place to triage somebody, and again, that can be repurposed. So those are kind of 10,000-foot view thoughts that we have of how to take grant money, how to take private money and public money, merge them together for success, not only short term, but long-term success and long-term use of that same money. And again, not
Right.
just wasted.
Thank you for describing that. And where Xnergy helped out in several ways. The city of Encinitas on that project, and several other projects that you're describing and things you're working on now. And full disclosure, what I forgot to mention, because people are probably wondering, well, how does she know all these people? Well, I've had my company for 10 years, and my company is a general contracting firm that specializes in clean energy projects and really resiliency. That's what our main focus is on. And I'm a California state licensed general contractor. And I know a lot of people look at me and are thinking, well, you're not a guy, you're a woman. So how I've actually had that. And also people say, well, where's the veteran? I'm like, you're looking at her. So I just want to throw that out there. But yes, and Jason, again, we've known each other for years. Jason, another full disclosure, is my mentor in terms of giving back. He gave back and he mentored me, and here I am looking at other ways to serve. Along those lines, with the grant and those grant funds, not just taking care of the solutions that our cities need, that our state needs, our nation needs, but also part of that need is job creation. Job creation, innovation, and Sedale, you hit it in terms of that innovation piece, that creativity piece that either went away, because I know that it does exist here in the U.S. and even here locally, absolutely. And if any place that exists, and I'm a California native, so I'm just going to say it absolutely exists here in California. We are a state of innovators, and why not have that within our state and our local communities? And also, not just the job creation, but it's the small businesses that create those jobs. And Jason, you know that. Yeah, so you're shaking your head there. So on that job creation piece and grants, there's so many. I know this from having my company, but I don't want to talk about my experience. But I want to shift it back over to Sedale. So since having open grants, what type of grants have you seen in the past, or maybe something you're working on currently that sparks job creation and entrepreneurship? And I'll throw a couple examples out there, possibly the SEED grant or EPIC. Can you speak along those lines? And maybe in the acronyms, I'm not going to try to act like I remember what they stand for. As in military, there's so many acronyms, and so I'll go ahead and give it a shot.
Yeah, no, we government in general has a lot of acronyms, that's for sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, CalSeed is one you mentioned just now. That's a grant program that is one of those shining, bright lights in the ecosystem for sure. It's not terribly onerous in terms of application, and I personally know the team that helped design it and build out the program, and they're incredible. And they did a lot of good work building in a lot of aspects of equity and accessibility to the program itself. Everything from standardizing the application to ensuring that the application wasn't overly burdensome, to examining the mechanisms for management of the application post-award. And it's a great example of the possibility, right? I think the title of the session, the lunch session today, Creative Solutions in Government. CalSeed is a beautiful example of the possibility. Like, this is what the world could look like. And unfortunately, it's just one program. And while it's a great program, and it funds, it funds entrepreneurs who are providing benefits to ratepayers, which is, folks who are paying for electricity here in the state of California. So it funds entrepreneurs who are changing the space and doing really innovative things with battery technology and autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles. It's a great program and a great example. But at the same time, it's also a reminder that, hey, there's this one great program, and there's $700 billion of other kinds of grant funding out there that's still stuck behind all of these bureaucratic walls. So it's certainly something to note that you have not only these programs that are providing capital to entrepreneurs to start businesses, which are creating new jobs, but they're creating the right kind of jobs. There's a shift happening in across the world, and there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of people losing their jobs, and there's a lot of people out of work at the same time. And there's a new kind of training and a new kind of job capability that's being required by the new economy that's starting to spin up here. And there's a lot of focus on upskilling workers. And yeah, it's just, CalSeed is a great example of how things probably should be. And I look forward to seeing and hope that the agencies and other people will continue to take notes and watch what California is doing.
Right. And what we can continue to do here at a local level to expand on what California is doing at a whole is taking a look at going back to that article that I read and within the San Diego Tribune about the layoffs. I strongly feel, despite, yes, I know we're in some unprecedented times, I strongly not just feel, I believe that it could have been prevented if grants were taken a look at, if planning, part of my piece on what we need to really take a look at within our city is planning. And Jason, as you know, being in the military, there's a whole lot of redundancy and planning in place, especially during crisis, disaster, and any type of threat that might come to our base or country, and taking a look at that. So we're always looking ahead. And I have, my family who's probably watching us, they'll say, oh my gosh, here she goes. She's doing, her military side of things. And I can't help it, but my brain thinks that way. And working at the California Operation Emergency Services Department during the wildfires recently, last year and the year before, during the summers, and also responding to the tribal communities that were experiencing these wildfires. I know how important it is to have that planning in place and to ensure all the checks and balances are there. And Sedale, you hit it on the nose. There's definitely a shift happening right now in front of us. The jobs that used to exist then, before COVID, are not probably in existence now. And I don't know if they will come back, or there'll be a shift in how we do business, right? And taking a look at that. But it's important to know that as we update our infrastructure within our city, that absolutely does need updating, not just here within the city of Vista, but throughout the county, throughout the state, that there are grants that take care of infrastructure. There are grants that take care of our needs in terms of creating jobs, entrepreneurs, our small businesses, and uplifting our communities. Along those lines, it's important to also recognize that we're in this shift. And it's also important to recognize that we need to listen to the people. It's so important that we need to listen to our local communities, and for a city not to just forcefully, I know you're not into the Vista politics, but I'm just putting out there, make these decisions without listening to people. I know, and I'm not sure how it is in your cities. I know within our city, we do allow input from the local side of things, but I'm not sure how much that is really heard, and I have to question that, especially in some of the recent decisions as well. And most importantly, part of this planning is taking a look at the future and encompassing all of that in one, and that can also be pieced in one by addressing climate. And here in San Diego, there have been a lot of recognized climate shifts and torrential rains. We have a lot of mudslides here in Vista, and I'm sure throughout San Diego County, and part of that planning does need to happen. So along those lines, I'll kind of close it out here and maybe just kind of throw out some last minute questions. I'll take a look at my notes here. Just taking a look at, I don't know how much you know about Vista and North County, Jason. What recommendations, based on your professional experience, would you say, maybe it's not particularly for, again, Vista, but as North County as a whole, what can we take a look at in moving to the future, given the times, and any piece of professional advice that you can provide?
Well, I think it goes back to what you said, resiliency. What is Vista doing for resiliency? What are you going to do for the people who live in the city of Vista on the next pandemic? Let's look ahead and not, let's learn from our current history. And what are we doing going forward for that? And that goes to what I was saying earlier about repurposing things you need now. Maybe there's, every city, and I, of course, I'm very familiar with Vista. I live in North County too. That every city needs infrastructure, and you hear from the federal level they talk about infrastructure might be coming up, right. But from a city, again, city should be a lot less political than it is in Washington D.C. or even Sacramento. The city should be, okay, what can we do for ourselves, right? This is it is selfish a little bit, right? You want to see what can Vista do for Vista and the people who live in Vista, and infrastructure is an important thing, and the infrastructure isn't just about building or fixing a road. Right. Infrastructure is about, okay, how do we spend money that can be repurposed, reused again and again, and go beyond. And not only that is, when you go out and you put projects out to public bid, what can we do to incentivize using disabled veteran companies? What can we do to incentivize to use local companies, Vista-owned companies, people who live in Vista. Absolutely. Maybe their business might be in Carlsbad, but give them an incentive if they live in Vista. I don't live in Vista, so I'm not saying this because I want the Vista work, obviously. But these are things that cities need to look at. What can we do to drive business within the city? Because if you're employing, if your projects and contracts are going to a person who lives or has a business in Vista, they'll have to hire more people, and then it's incumbent upon them to maybe look at Vista to hire people, hire veterans. That's our focus. We want to hire, and Vista's full of veterans. Vista full of Camp Pendleton Marines and veterans and Navy veterans, and they're awfully good workers. And look there. What can we do to incentivize? They have this 3% incentive you see on bids. It's a lot of that's disingenuous. It's going towards the pre-qualification of big national contractors to check a box that you hired a disabled veteran to do 3% of a project. That's not going far enough. That's right. really nothing. The big companies just ask you to check a box. They bring you on to rent some trash cans so they can do a 3% checkbox. We need more than that from cities, and that'll drive, again, local businesses, local employment, because these big contracting companies are out of state or they're not in Vista, they're somewhere else, and they're not, hiring local contractors. So
I
try
agree.
to keep into the big projects, find a new way to pre-qualify, local companies to do your projects. And that's, again, myopic looking from a construction engineering standpoint, but that can be utilized beyond that. Food services, everything the city does can be looked at more, narrow focus onto what can it do to keep the money and the employment in the city.
I agree. And thank you for saying that, because I forgot to mention that, a proponent, absolutely strong proponent of hiring local. And even as a contractor that wasn't local within the city that we were working on, an example, Livermore, Sacramento, all over, up and down the state, we always made a point to hire local, because we knew how important it was to hire local within the city. And then also on a statewide level, to grow the number of small businesses and supporting those programs, particularly grants that support innovation within clean energy technologies, or just innovation technologies in general. We that's who we are as Americans. That's built in our DNA. And to overcome a lot of these crises that we find ourselves in right now, which is literally a storm. And it's a matter of having that vision through the storm that'll take us there. So hiring veterans, hiring local small business within our communities, particularly in this case, Vista, and then of course, hiring local and urban planning, building for our future with purpose and meaning that will benefit our communities. And it's yes. And I'll reference Rod Matthews, not really suggestion, but comment of how he had mentioned that he's concerned, because Rod Matthews, he's a local here in Vista. I met him through one of the local chambers here, and addressing his concern is, how do we get these programs within our city? How do we get our city to hear us? And I think that's not just our city concern. That's a lot of our concerns, not at a city, but also a state level. So I know we're probably over time right now, but I just wanted to see if there's anybody from the audience, if we have any questions out there who's listening. Michael, I'm not sure if you see any questions coming through, but gentlemen, if you're still available, we can make ourselves available to answer any questions that the audience might have.
Yeah, no, thank you, Liz. We definitely addressed Rod's comment. He was concerned about how Vista, or how the city could approach a lot what Jason was talking about, and he reiterated and looked at and I think you did too, Perez. So thank you. I wanted to say thank you for everybody that was joining the show. There's a lot of you that are all over California that are tuning in, because this is important to our community. But with that, I'll hand it back over to Perez to sign us off for today.
Well, I just want to close with this. As I mentioned, yes, we do find ourselves in unprecedented times, and literally in a storm. And my wish for everyone is to be aware, and through this storm, be creative, find solutions, work together. And that's so important. And I just want to thank, and absolutely be safe. I want to thank Jason Davis with Xnergy, and I believe it's Xnergy.com, but you can correct me there. What is your website, Jason?
It's XnergyUSA.com.
Thank you, XnergyUSA.com. And I want to thank Sedale Turbovsky for being on the show as well, and giving us his insight and experience. And your website, Sedale?
Is you can just type in opengrants.io and we'll come right up. So
awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And go ahead and check out some of the recent news that is going on within the Vista Vote Perez campaign next week, starting Tuesday, to create awareness on different social justice issues and issues like this and promoting small business within disadvantaged and underrepresented communities, I'm running 215 miles. I don't know if you know that, Sedale.
I saw that.
Yeah,
It made me tired reading it.
Yes. 215 miles from Fort Tejon to Madera. And people have asked me, why are you doing that? Why starting from Fort Tejon? And I'm starting at Fort Tejon because it's actually a part of California Native American history that isn't widely known. And it's more or less the California Trail of Tears. So more to come on that. Check it out and log on and join that journey with me at Vista Vote Perez, and then I'll of course be on social media within Vista Vote Perez Facebook. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe out there. Take care.